In the small, isolated village of Yoku, hidden by thick trees and the deep waters of the Yoku River, there was a rule that no one ever dared to break. The villagers called it the Forbidden River because of the strange rumors that swirled around it. It was said that the river was cursed, that dark forces lived within its waters, and anyone who dared go near it would never return. No one really knew what was true, but no one dared to test the stories. Everyone in the village knew to stay far away from the river, even though it flowed right through their land. But there was one girl in Yoku who was different from everyone else. Aziza was not afraid of the river. Since she was a child, she felt a strange connection to the river and its creatures, especially the snakes. They would slither up to her, resting gently at her feet as though they recognized her. The villagers whispered that she had been born with a gift, or perhaps a curse. Despite their warnings, Aziza loved the river, and nothing could keep her away. She was different, and she felt something calling her to the river, a voice only she could hear. At the age of 16, Aziza began to notice something strange. The Yoku River, once calm and clear, began to change. Its water, once a bright blue, slowly turned darker, until one fateful evening, it was crimson red. The villagers panicked, believing the curse had finally struck. People hurried to board their homes, fearing the worst. But Aziza stood still at the edge of the river, watching it with wide eyes. Her heart raced as she felt the strange pull toward the water, stronger than ever before. There was something in the river that had never been there before. Without thinking, she stepped into the river, the cold water swirling around her ankles. The river seemed to welcome her, as though it recognized her. She waded further into the crimson depths, until she saw something shimmering beneath the surface. Something was alive in the water. As she reached down, her fingers brushed against something smooth and cold. Suddenly, a mermaid burst from the water, her hair long and dark like the shadows of the night. Her eyes, full of pain and longing, locked with Aziza's. The mermaid, though beautiful, was not a creature of grace. Her tail, once bright and powerful, now appeared weak, like it had been cursed for years. She gazed at Aziza with sadness in her eyes, as though Aziza was the key to her freedom. Aziza, though shocked, did not feel fear. Instead, she felt a deep sense of understanding, as if she had known the mermaid her entire life. The mermaid spoke softly, her voice a whisper carried by the river's current. "I am the guardian of this river," she said, "but a curse binds me here, trapping me in this endless sorrow. Only someone with a connection to the river can break it." Aziza's heart ached. She didn't fully understand, but she knew she had to help. The mermaid looked at her with pleading eyes, and Aziza knew that this was a moment of fate. Without thinking, Aziza reached out, her hands touching the mermaid's tail. Suddenly, a burst of energy shot through Aziza, as though the river had chosen her. The mermaid's curse broke with a loud crack, and the water around them began to calm. The red hue of the river faded, and its waters slowly returned to their original blue. Aziza's heart raced as she stood in the river, the mermaid now free. She felt a strange power flowing through her, as though she had unlocked a hidden strength within herself. She stepped back onto the shore, breathing heavily, but the mermaid was not alone. As Aziza turned to leave, she felt a strange warmth in her chest. The mermaid followed her, swimming along the edge of the water, as though guiding her. "You have freed me," the mermaid said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. "But in return, you have bound yourself to the river. Aziza blinked, confused. What do you mean? The river is not just a body of water. It is alive, and now you are connected to it. It will protect you, and you will protect it. But there is more, Aziza. There is a power in you, a gift that runs through your veins. You are not just a human, you are something greater. Aziza's head spun. What was the mermaid talking about? But before she could ask any more questions, the mermaid disappeared back into the river. Aziza, feeling more connected to the river than ever, returned to the village, her thoughts filled with unanswered questions. Months passed, and Aziza's life slowly returned to normal. Yet, there was something different about her. She began to feel changes within her body, subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. Her senses were sharper, her connection to the river even stronger. She could hear its whispers in the wind, feel its currents in the air, as if it was speaking directly to her. But as these changes deepened, something unexpected happened. One day, Aziza discovered she was pregnant. The news was a shock to everyone, especially since she hadn't been with anyone in that way. The villagers whispered even more than before, fearful of what the child might become. Could the river's curse have reached Aziza in ways no one understood? But Aziza, though confused and frightened, couldn't deny the bond she felt with the child growing inside her. She soon realized that the child was no ordinary baby. When she told the mermaid about her pregnancy, the mermaid's eyes widened with surprise. The child you carry, it is not just a human child. He is part of the river. He is a demigod. Aziza's heart raced. Could this child, Kamari, be the key to breaking the river's curse forever? Would he be the one to end the cycle of mystery that haunted the Yoku River? The day Aziza gave birth to her son was both beautiful and terrifying. Kamari was born healthy and strong, his eyes sparkling with curiosity, as though he already knew more than he should. The villagers were relieved that he appeared normal, yet they couldn't help but wonder about the strange power they sensed in him. As Kamari grew, it became clear that he had inherited his mother's connection to the river. From a young age, he would play by the riverbank, speaking to the snakes as though they were old friends. But despite his natural affinity with the river, Kamari also felt a strange fear towards it. He would sit by the edge of the river, watching its currents with wide, fearful eyes. There was something about the river that unsettled him, as though it was calling to him in ways he didn't understand. Aziza tried to comfort him, but she too was filled with an uneasy feeling she couldn't explain. Could it be that Kamari was destined for something greater, something darker? Kamari's 10th birthday was approaching, and a strange change began to take hold of him. It was subtle at first. He became quiet, withdrawn, and spent more time near the river, staring at it for hours without speaking. Aziza tried to keep him away from the water, fearing that the river's curse might take hold of him. But one fateful night, the pull of the river became too strong. Kamari awoke in the middle of the night, his eyes glazed with a strange, unnatural light. He slipped out of bed and walked to the river, his feet moving as though someone was guiding him. Aziza woke to the sound of footsteps and rushed to the riverbank, calling his name. But it was too late. Kamari had already stepped into the water. Aziza screamed as the river's current swallowed him whole, pulling him beneath the surface. No matter how hard she searched, she couldn't find him. Kamari was gone. The news of Kamari's disappearance spread quickly through the village. Everyone mourned his loss, but none felt the pain as deeply as Aziza. The connection she had with her son was more than just that of a mother and child, they were bound by the river itself. She knew that the river had taken him, but why? Aziza spent days beside the river, hoping to hear Kumari's voice, to feel his presence once more. But all she felt was a deep, empty silence. She couldn't understand what had happened, or why the river had called him. The pain of losing Kumari was unbearable, and she found herself questioning everything she had once believed about the river, her gift, and her son. But then, one evening, as she sat beside the water, something strange happened. The mermaid emerged from the river, her eyes full of sorrow. "I know your pain, Aziza," she said, her voice soft and full of understanding. "Kumari's fate was not your fault. He was a demigod, and the river had a role to play in his destiny." Aziza looked at her with tears in her eyes. "Why? Why did he have to die?" The mermaid paused, then spoke with a heavy heart. "Kumari was meant to break the curse of the river, but his journey was not meant to be an easy one. His death was part of the cycle." Aziza was stunned. Could this really be true? Was Kumari's death a sacrifice? And what did it mean for her and the river's future? As the days passed, the grief continued to weigh heavily on Aziza's heart. The village mourned with her, but the mystery of Kumari's death only deepened. Aziza knew she had to find answers, and so she turned to the river itself, the place where everything had started. It was then that the mermaid reappeared, her eyes glowing with ancient knowledge. "Aziza, there is something you must understand. You are not just a girl from this village. You are the reincarnation of a river goddess. The blood of the river runs through your veins, and Kumari was born to fulfill a great destiny." Aziza was stunned. A river goddess? Kumari, a demigod? Everything she thought she knew about herself and her son suddenly seemed to change. But the mermaid continued, revealing more about their connection to the river, and the greater purpose that lay ahead. Kumari's death was not the end, the mermaid said. It was the beginning of something new. The Yoko River will heal, but only if you understand your true power. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and Aziza knew she had to face whatever came next. But the weight of her destiny felt heavier than ever. The days after Kumari's death were some of the hardest Aziza had ever faced. The villagers remained quiet, unsure of what to believe about the strange events that had unfolded. But Aziza knew that her connection to the river wasn't over. It was just beginning. One night, as Aziza stood at the edge of the Yoko River, she felt the presence of the mermaid again. This time, she wasn't alone. The river had returned to its calm, clear waters, and it seemed to pulse with a renewed energy. "Aziza, it's time," the mermaid said. "The river is ready to heal, and so are you. You must embrace your true self. Only then can you bring peace to the Yoko River and to the legacy of your son." Aziza felt the weight of her destiny. It was a heavy burden, but one that she could no longer deny. She stepped into the river, feeling its cool waters wrap around her. And as she did, she knew that her journey was far from over. The river had called her, and now it was time to answer. Kumari's legacy lived on in the river, but Aziza knew that she had to continue the work that he had started. As the days turned into weeks, Aziza became more connected to the river than ever before. She understood its rhythms, its moods, and its mysteries. The river, once a place of fear and curses, was beginning to heal. The villagers noticed the change, though they did not understand the full extent of it. Aziza had become a part of the river itself, and the river had become a part of her. It was then that the mermaid returned once more, her eyes filled with quiet pride. "You have done it, Aziza. You have broken the curse. The river is no longer bound by darkness." Aziza smiled, but her heart still ached for Komari. His death had not been in vain. It had been part of the cycle that would allow the river to heal. As time passed, the Yoku River became a place of peace. The villagers slowly returned to their old ways, no longer afraid of the waters. Aziza, now fully embracing her power, watched over the river as its guardian. But deep inside, she always remembered Komari. And one day, when the time was right, a new child would be born, one who would carry on the legacy of both Aziza and Komari, a child who would bring even more healing to the Yoku River and its people. The story of Aziza, the river goddess, and Komari, the demigod, would live on forever in the hearts of the villagers. The Yoku River had been healed, but its mysteries would never fully be understood. The legacy of the river, and of Aziza and Komari, would be passed down through generations. And as the river flowed through the village, it carried with it a message of hope, love, and the eternal bond between a mother and her child.